ESPN's Tom Luginbill is with us now on the Pepsi Hotline. He joins us each week, courtesy of our friends at Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear, just off I-65 in Cullman. What's up, Lugs? How are you?
Good morning, guys. How we doing?
Doing great. Thanks a lot. The Oregon program on the field, no doubt's better than the Miami program. Is this about the difficulty to recruit to Eugene, Oregon? The fact that you have to recruit all over America, you can't recruit in your own backyard like you can in Miami?
I think that has something to do with it. I would imagine there's a variety of factors here for Mario Cristobal. Obviously, he's a Miami alum. He knows intimately the southeast footprint of this country and how talent-rich it is. He's got an ailing mother in the area, which I think was really, really important at this point in his life. And they're a private university. They're a private institution. So if they really choose to make the investment to go forward, I think he sees a tremendous opportunity to get really good really fast. Now, here's the X factor in all of this, guys, and I think it's gotten glossed over. This all happened without an athletic director. But if Dan Radakovich, as it's been rumored, is going to be taking the job as the athletic director at the University of Miami, this thing's going to get really strong really fast because he is one of those athletic directors that unapologetically, when he arrived at Clemson, he essentially said football is going to drive the bus of this institution and everybody's going to benefit. We are going to invest in our greatest revenue producer. Commerce goes up. Building expansion on campus goes up. Enrollment, applications for enrollment, your community involvement, everything because you invested in football. That's what Miami, in my opinion, has been lacking. They need to push all their chips to the table in the sport of football. They've got to upgrade their facilities. They've got to upgrade their branding. I don't know if they could find something. I don't even know if it could be marshland. Find something to get you a 40,000 seat stadium on campus. You know, I don't know if it's possible. If it is, they got to find a way to do it. So it might be the marriage of Mario Cristobal and Dan Radakovich. If that ends up happening, the stars could be aligning for the perfect marriage for Miami to get really, really good, really, really quickly.
Radakovich, by the way, a Miami grad as well, back in 1983, a business major down there in Coral Gables. So I'll ask you, for Alabama and Kirby Smart in Georgia and all the SEC powers that go to below I-4 to recruit, does Mario Cristobal, is he able to do what Schnellenberger did back in the day? Can he keep the SEC powers out?
He's going to be darn close, and I'll tell you why. And I'm not knocking the previous leaders of the Miami program, but I am going to tell you on record that from a recruiting perspective, Mario Cristobal will outwork all of those other guys. And it will be a 24/7, 365-day-a-year grind in player evaluation and resources committed to recruiting every day. And I think that more than anything else. Listen, Mario's been at FIU. He's been at Miami. He understands the landscape, not only in the state of Florida, but the entire Southeast. And he knows who the predators are right now. But right now for Miami, the predators aren't necessarily Florida, aren't necessarily Florida State. It's Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State. Those are the big dogs right now in college football. That's who he has to guard against. And so I know from a work ethic standpoint, things just became more challenging for everybody else. So if you're a Miami fan, that's got to be awfully encouraging. But there's a lot of work to do. Like I said, they've been behind the eight ball in a lot of areas that others in college football have gone right by them. And I think the biggest mindset, guys, that he has to change is he has to bring in guys that want to win at Miami currently while they're there, not guys that see Miami as being a vessel to the NFL. Over the last 10 to 15 years, how many guys have we seen that are high-profile players that went to Miami, all right? They were okay players, pretty good players, but are now in the NFL and thriving. There needs to have a care and a pride back into this program if you're going to win a national championship or compete for a college football playoff spot. It can't just be looked at as the image of Miami, and that can be a pathway to the NFL.
Yeah, and that happened back in the 80s because of the basically recruiting the neighborhoods around the campus. Obviously, Alabama fans are very familiar with what comes from that part of the country at the receiving position. What is the biggest asset down there? Is it receivers? Is it running backs, linebackers, defensive linemen, DBs? What's the hotbed down in South Florida?
D, all of the above. Listen, I honestly, And there's a reason why everybody spends a lot of time recruiting, Dade, Broward, all of those areas down there, those counties down there in South Florida. There are so many nooks and crannies. If you've ever been in the sugarcane fields of Pahokee or Glades, you can find yourself lost real quick. And the next thing you know, you pop up against a high school and there's 10 Power 5 prospects there. So I think he knows the nooks and crannies of South Florida. I think there has to be a blend between play right away guys and that raw, talented guy that maybe he's not ready right away, but becomes a great player through player development and direction and leadership. That's what Mario Cristobal is going to be tasked with doing. I think the thing about Mario is he's a very, very detail-oriented person. He is not a micromanager, but he is going to be involved in everything that the program attempts to do, and it starts with player evaluation. And so I just think that there are going to be more challenges now if Georgia goes into South Florida and Alabama goes into South Florida and Ohio State goes into South Florida. Are there plenty of guys to go around? Are you going to lose a guy here and there? Yes, it's inevitable. But the bottom line is not only keeping the best players, but making sure the ones you chose, because there's a lot of them, you're keeping the right players.
ESPN's Tom Luginbill is with us on the Pepsi Hotline. He joins us each week courtesy of Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear, just off I-65 in Cullman. Great idea for Christmas gifts. Let's talk about the college football playoff matchups. We'll start with Bama and Cincinnati. We know they are really good on the corners. You've seen this team in person. Really good on the corners. The other side of that is they have not faced a quarterback, I would say, close to what Bryce Young is.
Well, and they haven't faced any type of offensive personnel overall that comes even close to what Alabama is going to present. Indiana at the Power 5 level certainly didn't have it, had a disappointing season. I've seen Notre Dame. They do not have elite skilled personnel on offense outside of their tight end, Michael Mayer. So this is going to be a significant challenge. I look at two things with this matchup. Number one, I don't think you can gloss over the difference in depth and the gap between the ones and the twos and the threes that can manifest itself in a matchup like this. Because over the course of 4 quarters, if an Ahmad Gardner had to go off the field or a Myjai Sanders at defensive end goes off the field, the guy that's replacing those two players is likely not the same player. So how do you combat that? All right. That leads me to my second point. The one area that Alabama has always seemed to struggle with in today's offensive era is the dynamic athletic quarterback that can be used as a designated runner. And outside of Alabama's own quarterback, the only quarterback in the college football playoff that brings that element is Desmond Ridder. And Desmond Ridder, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, for whatever reason, has not been a focal point of Cincinnati's run game. All right. He needs to be one against Alabama, because when you're playing against a quarterback, let's just say like a Stetson Bennett or a Cade McNamara or a JT Daniels, you're playing against a stationary player where on every snap you know where he's going to be, right? Essentially, you're playing 11 on 10 because you don't have to worry about the quarterback being a problem for you. You do when Desmond Ridder is playing quarterback. And that, I think that for Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati, that's got to be a big part of the game plan. And then, to be honest with you, Cincinnati, the last 2 to 3 weeks, including the championship game against Houston, has been abysmal on third down. In fact, they did not convert a third down versus Houston in the American Athletic Conference championship game. So how do you play with Alabama for 4 quarters? You got to sustain drives and keep Bryce Young and that crew on the sideline.
True or false in the other game? Georgia and Michigan play the same style, almost identical football. Georgia just does it with better players.
Absolutely true. The question is going to be is who's the better team on that day? Because I have such an appreciation, and I've been a staunch critic of Jim Harbaugh in this Michigan program, not because they're not a competitive program, and really not because he hasn't done a good job. I do think he's done a good job. But up until they beat Ohio State, they couldn't beat anybody that was any good. They couldn't win any games in highly anticipated matchups. And they deserve a lot of credit for getting over that hump. This is the best overall team, top to bottom, that he has had. And a lot of the reason why is he's had good defensive football teams before. They've had good edge pass rushers. They've had the Rashawn Garys and the Jabril Peppers. They've had good teams. But he finally solidified the quarterback position. So whether it's Cade McNamara as a steady and consistent force, or you bring in the freshman J.J. McCarthy, they have some semblance of an identity, and they're not having to work around the quarterback. So they can run the football, they can create explosive plays on offense, they're physical at the point of attack, They're really talented at all three levels defensively. They do not hurt themselves. They don't make mistakes, and they value the football. Well, you know what? Georgia does the same thing. Georgia just may have better top-to-bottom depth as far as talent, okay, than Michigan does. But right now, Michigan's got a great football team. And I think sometimes when you're playing hot and you're peaking at the right time, which Michigan did, that can provide a lot of value in a matchup like this. This is probably, in my opinion, the most evenly matched semifinal game that we have seen in the college football playoff era.
Did you feel that way before Alabama took them to the woodshed on Saturday? If that had gone away, most people thought it would have went. Would you have thought that if Georgia and Michigan were playing?
I would, just because of how the two teams are built. And keep in mind, outside of the Georgia-Oklahoma semifinal in the Rose Bowl, we haven't had a semifinal that's not been a blowout.
Yeah, they've
all been blowouts, right? So when I look at these teams and I say, wow, all right, well, who matches up well? Who's kind of strength versus strength? And I look at Georgia and I look at Michigan. And listen, all teams have deficiencies, right, guys? But I look at those two teams. Is there a glaring weakness? Like, is there something that stands out and you just say, wow, oh, man, I tell you what, if that gets exposed, they're in big, big trouble. Now, you could maybe point to Georgia and say that's the case at quarterback. It really wasn't up until they played Alabama. Now they have a decision to make depending upon JT Daniels' health and Stetson Bennett, who they think gives you the best chance to win not only a playoff game but a championship. But I'm of the belief, guys, that I don't know if you can truly win a national championship unless you have either a difference maker or a guy that can win the game throwing the football for you late in the game. And that's probably the biggest question with Georgia right now.
Real quickly, Lugs, if you were Oregon, you would hire who and why?
Wow.
Is Chip Kelly on your radar? Would you reboot that?
I think it's got to be on your radar. Justin Wilcox, who's the head coach at Cal, is an Oregon alum. I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for the job that he's done at Cal. It's a very difficult job. He's an outstanding defensive football coach. I'm going to say something here, and it's going to create all kinds of stir. But, I mean, if you're Brian Harsin, if you're Oregon, do you reach out to Brian Harsin, given, the proximity in his time in the Pacific Northwest? Listen, it's a good job with a full cupboard, guys. Mario Cristobal put together a team, and you look at the injuries they had this year. You look at some of the players that had to fill in for the best players that they had on their team that got hurt. That is going to be a really talented roster that somebody's going to inherit.
All right, that's ESPN's Tom Luginbill. He's on the Pepsi Hotline. He is presented by our friends at Jack's Outdoor and Western Wear right there. Just off I-65 in Cullman. Go get those great Christmas gifts for the outdoors person, the Western wear lover, and your life at Jack's. Luginbill, thank you, brother. We'll see you next Tuesday.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
All right, buddy. You too. Tom Luginbill with us on the Pepsi Hotline.